Have you ever felt cold so deep that it stops being a temperature and starts feeling like a physical weight, pressing the life right out of your lungs? I'm talking about the kind of cold that snaps your eyelashes together and turns your breath into shards of ice before it even leaves your lips. That was Seattle on November 15th, 4 degrees Fahrenheit, a record-breaking blizzard. And there I was, Wren Carmichael, standing on the porch of the house I grew up in, feeling my life and my baby's life slipping away. I pressed my palm against the glass of the French doors. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't keep it still. Inside, the fireplace was roaring. I could see the orange glow dancing on the mahogany walls, the walls my grandmother had paid for. I could see the crystal decanter of scotch on the side table, and I could see them, my father, Richard, and my brother, Bradley. "Please," I mouthed. The wind tore the sound away, but they could see me. I knew they could see me. I banged on the glass again, harder this time, even though pain shot up my arm. "Dad, please, I need the signature." I wasn't asking for money, not really. I was asking for a signature on a guarantor form for the hospital. My blood pressure had spiked to 180/110. The doctor said I had severe preeclampsia. I needed an emergency C-section, or my baby girl and I were both going to die. But because my father controlled my trust fund, my mother's money, mind you, until I turned 35, and because he had frozen my company insurance out of spite, I needed him to sign off. Just a signature. That was it. Inside the warm, golden light of the living room, Bradley turned to look at me. He was holding a glass of that expensive scotch, swirling it around. He laughed. He actually laughed. He said something to my father, pointing at me like I was a stray dog scratching at the door. My father didn't even turn his head. He just sat in his leather armchair, reading the Wall Street Journal, ignoring the daughter bleeding on his doorstep. I felt a sharp cramp rip through my abdomen, buckling my knees. I gasped, sliding down the glass door until I was kneeling on the frozen slate of the porch. The snow was piling up around my legs, soaking through my thin maternity leggings. I looked down. In the pale light spilling from the window, I saw it, a dark stain spreading on the snow between my legs. Blood. "No," I whispered, clutching my belly. "No, no, no. Hold on, baby. Please hold on." I dragged myself back up, screaming this time. "Bradley, I'm bleeding. Open the door." Bradley walked over to the glass. He loomed over me, warm and safe in his cashmere sweater. He leaned close to the pane, his breath fogging it up from the inside. "You're quite the actress, Wren." His voice was muffled through the double-paned glass, but I heard every word. "Dad says go home. You're embarrassing us." "I'm dying!" I shrieked, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Your niece is dying!" Bradley unlocked the door, and for a split second, I thought he was going to help. A wave of heat rushed out, smelling of wood smoke and old money. I reached out, but he didn't pull me in. He stepped out, just enough to shove me backward. "Don't touch me," he sneered, wiping his sleeve as if my desperation was contagious. "You want that money so bad? You want the inheritance? You know the rules, Wren. If the heir dies without issue, the trust reverts to the closest male relative. That's me." He looked at my stomach, then at my face, with eyes so cold they made the blizzard feel like a summer breeze. "Do the math, sis. You dying out here, it's the best business deal I've made all year." He stepped back inside. He slammed the heavy oak door, and then the sound that haunts my nightmares. Click. The deadbolt sliding home. I pounded on the wood until my knuckles cracked and bled. "Dad! Dad! He locked me out! Dad!" The lights in the living room flickered. Then, one by one, they went out. They left me in the dark. The wind howled, burying me in white. I curled into a ball against the brickwork, trying to shield my belly with my coat. The pain was blinding now, a rhythmic, tearing agony. I was 7 months pregnant, a widow, and I was being murdered by my own family on the front porch of the home where I learned to walk. I looked at the driveway. My old sedan was blocked in by the snowplow drifts. My phone was dead, battery drained by the cold. I was trapped. "I'm sorry, David," I whispered to my late husband. "I'm so sorry. I failed her." My visions started to tunnel. The cold stopped hurting and started to feel warm, which I knew was the end, hypothermia. I closed my eyes, visualizing my baby's heart beating, trying to send her whatever heat I had left. This is it, I thought. This is how the Carmichael legacy ends. Not with a bang, but with a frozen whimper. But as the darkness took me, I felt a spark of something else. Not hope, not yet. Hate. Pure, molten hate. It was the only thing keeping me warm. As the snow buried me, my mind drifted back. Not to happier times, I hadn't had those in a long while, but to the slow, grinding hell that led me to this frozen porch. 6 months. That's how long it had been since David died. A drunk driver crossed the center line on I-5 and smashed our world to pieces. David was the only one who ever saw me. Not Ren, the workhorse, not Ren, the scapegoat. Just Ren. When he died, he took the color of the world with him. I didn't even have time to grieve. The day after his funeral, my father called me. Not to ask how I was, but to scream about a deadline. "The Riverside project is stalling, Florence." He always used my full name when he was angry. "Get your ass in here. We're losing money." So I went. I went back to Carmichael Construction, the company my grandmother built from the ground up, the company my father was driving into the ground. I was the head of design, officially. In reality, I was the fixer. I was the ghost. My office was a converted storage closet in the back, drafty and cramped, while Bradley, my older brother, the executive vice president, sat in the corner office with the view of the Space Needle. A man who couldn't read a blueprint if his life depended on it. A man who spent company funds on crypto schemes and client dinners that were just excuses to get wasted with his frat buddies. Every morning for the last 6 months, I waddled into that office carrying the weight of my grief and my growing baby. I worked 16-hour days. I fixed the structural flaws Bradley missed. I smoothed over relationships with clients he insulted. I balanced the books he tried to cook. And my salary? A joke. My father claimed the company was tight on cash, so he cut my pay by 40%. "It's a family sacrifice," he said. Meanwhile, Bradley got a new Porsche leased on the company dime. "You don't need money," Bradley had told me just last week, leaning against my desk, smelling of mints and lies. "You're a widow. You're single. You'll just spend it on baby clothes. The company needs liquidity." I bit my tongue. I always bit my tongue. I needed the health insurance. I needed the connection to my grandmother's legacy. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the theft of my mind. 3 months ago, we pitched the Sapphire Tower project. It was the bid that would save the company. I spent nights awake, weeping over David's photo, then forcing myself to draw. I designed a sustainable, glass-skinned marvel that harvested rainwater and solar energy. It was beautiful. It was my masterpiece. I submitted it under the company file. 2 weeks later, at the press conference, my father stood at the podium. "And the genius behind this revolutionary design," he beamed, gesturing to the side, "my son, Bradley Carmichael." Bradley stepped up, flashing that winning, unearned smile. He accepted the award, he accepted the praise. He didn't even know what cantilever meant, yet there he was, explaining my design to the Seattle Times. I stood in the back, near the catering staff, holding a glass of water. My hand drifted to my belly. "It's for you, Peanut," I whispered. "We just need to survive until the trust fund unlocks." That was the trap. My grandmother, God rest her soul, tried to protect me. She left me a massive inheritance, millions in stocks and assets, but put it in a trust controlled by my father until I was 35 or until I got married. When David died, control reverted to Dad. He held it over my head like a guillotine. "You leave," he'd threaten, "and I cut off the stipend. I cut off the insurance. You and that bastard child will starve." So I stayed. I worked. And I kept a secret. See, they didn't know everything. They didn't know that late at night, when the pain of missing David was too much, I designed other things. Weird, avant-garde, brilliant things. And I submitted them to international contests online under a pseudonym, Vera Vane. Vera Vane was becoming a legend in the architectural world, a mystery. People were asking, "Who is she? Where is she?" My father and Bradley were obsessed with Vera Vane. "If we could hire this Vera person," Bradley had said in a meeting, staring right at me without seeing me, "we could land the Thorn contract." I wanted to scream, "I'm right here." But I didn't. I just took notes, swallowed my pride, and prayed for a miracle. I didn't know the miracle would come wrapped in a nightmare. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Ren's story. Does hearing about this kind of family betrayal make your blood boil too? I want to know where you are watching from. Comment the name of your city below so I can see how far Ren's cry for justice is reaching. The darkness was complete. The snow was a heavy blanket now, inches thick over my legs. I had stopped shivering. That was bad. I knew that was bad. My mind was starting to play tricks on me. I saw David. He was standing at the end of the driveway, waving. "Come on, Ren," he seemed to say. "It's warm over here." "I can't," I mumbled, my lips barely moving. "The baby." "Goodbye, Daddy," I whispered. "Goodbye, Bradley. I hope the money keeps you warm." Then, light, real light. Not the hallucination of heaven, but twin beams of blinding white cutting through the swirling snow. A deep, powerful engine purred, not the rattle of a plow, but the low growl of a predator. A car had stopped at the gate of the Carmichael estate, a massive, sleek black car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom. I tried to wave, but my arm was a block of wood. I tried to scream, but only a croak came out. "Please, please see me." The gate was closed. The car idled for a moment. I thought it was going to turn around. I thought, this is it. They're leaving. Then the driver's door opened. A large man in a uniform stepped out to check the keypad. But as he turned, his flashlight swept across the porch. The beam passed me, then snapped back. "Jesus Christ!" the voice roared over the wind. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce flew open. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a bespoke suit that cost more than my car. He didn't run, he sprinted. He vaulted over the low stone wall, ignoring the gate, plowing through the knee-deep snow. "Madam, can you hear me?" He was beside me in seconds. He had silver-gray hair, piercing blue eyes, and a face that looked carved from granite. I recognized him instantly. Everyone in Seattle construction recognized him. Julian Thorne, the billionaire, the CEO of Thorne Global, the man my father had been trying to get a meeting with for 5 years, the man Bradley was desperate to impress. He was kneeling in the snow, ruining his Italian trousers. He ripped off his suit jacket and wrapped it around me. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of cedar and rain. "I've got you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "James, get the blankets, now." My baby," I stammered, my teeth chattering violently now that I was being moved. Preeclampsia. "We're going to the hospital," Julian commanded. He didn't ask if I could walk. He scooped me up in his arms as if I weighed nothing. I saw his jaw clench when he saw the blood on the snow. He looked at the front door of the house. He looked at the dark windows. Then he looked at the footprints in the snow, Bradley's footprints, that came out to the porch and turned back inside. "Did they lock you out?" Julian asked, his voice low and dangerous. I nodded against his chest. "My brother, needed signature." Julian didn't say another word. He carried me to the car. The back seat was like a spaceship. Warm leather, soft lights. He laid me down across the seat. "Hospital, Swedish medical. Drive like hell, James," Julian ordered the driver. As the car sped away, leaving the house of horrors behind, my hand unclenched. I had been holding something tight this whole time, a piece of paper. It was the crumpled sketch I had brought to show my father, a peace offering, a new design concept. It was signed, in the corner, with my secret signature, V. Vane. Julian picked it up. He smoothed it out on his knee. I saw his eyes widen. He looked at the sketch, complex, brilliant, unmistakable, and then he looked at me, the half-frozen, pregnant woman, bleeding on his leather seats. "You," he whispered. "It's you." That was the last thing I heard before the blackness took me for good. Beep, beep, the sound of life. I opened my eyes. Everything was white and chrome. The smell wasn't wood smoke and scotch. It was antiseptic and lavender. I wasn't cold. I was warm, wrapped in heavy, heated blankets. Panic surged. "The baby!" I tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pushed me back. "She's fine. You're both fine." I turned my head. Sitting in a chair next to my bed was Julian Thorne. He looked tired. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled up. He had been there all night. "We had to do an emergency C-section," Julian said softly. "She was in distress, Ren, but she's a fighter. She's in the NICU, 4 pounds 2 ounces, but strong." Tears, hot and fast, streamed down my face. "She's alive?" "She's alive," Julian confirmed. "Dr. Rodriguez said if we had arrived 10 minutes later, well, let's not talk about that." I lay back, the relief washing over me so hard I felt dizzy. Then the memory hit me. The cold, the laughter, the click of the lock. "My father," I choked out. "Does he know?" Julian's face hardened. "No, I admitted you under a Jane Doe alias. I used my private security team to block any public records. As far as your family knows, you never came back from the snow." I stared at the ceiling. "They think I'm dead. They wanted me dead." "I saw the security footage," Julian said. I froze. "What?" "My driver, James. He used to be Special Forces. While I was bringing you in, he pulled the data from your father's gate camera. He hacked the local loop. I heard what your brother said, Ren." Julian stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "Do the math, sis. You dying out here is the best business deal I've made all year." That's what he said. He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw the billionaire tycoon, the shark. "That is attempted murder, Ren. I can have the police there in 20 minutes. "No," I blurted out. Julian looked surprised. "No?" "If you arrest them now," I said, my voice gaining strength, "they'll hire expensive lawyers. They'll claim it was an accident. They'll say I was hysterical, that I wandered off. My father has judges in his pocket. He'll get a slap on the wrist, and he'll keep my money. He'll keep my grandmother's company." I pushed myself up, wincing at the pain from the incision. But the pain was good. It focused me. "I don't want them in jail," I said, my voice dropping to a register I didn't know I possessed. Not yet. I want them destroyed. I want them to lose everything. I want them to feel the cold. I looked at the mirror on the wall opposite the bed. I looked terrible, pale, bruised, dark circles under my eyes. But beneath that, I saw something new. The snap. The moment the victim dies and the survivor is born. I wasn't the sad widow anymore. I wasn't the dutiful daughter. I was a mother who had almost lost her child to greed. I want to take the company, I said. I want to take the house. I want to take the reputation they care about so much. Julian studied me. He walked back to the chair and sat down, leaning forward. And how do you propose to do that, Miss Carmichael? You have no money. Your assets are frozen. I reached for the bedside table where my personal bag had been placed. I pulled out my tablet. It was cracked, but it still worked. I opened a folder and turned the screen to him. You like the sketch you found? I asked. He nodded slowly. It's brilliant. It reminds me of Vera Vane, I finished. Julian paused. Yes, exactly. I am Vera Vane, I said. Silence filled the room. Julian looked at the tablet, scrolling through the files. The CAD drawings, the timestamps, the email correspondence with international design firms. The undeniable proof that the most sought-after architect in the hidden market was sitting in a hospital gown in front of him. My family doesn't know, I explained. They think I'm just a secretary who knows how to use a ruler. But I designed the Riverside complex. I designed the Sapphire Tower. Bradley stole them. Julian looked up, and a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predatory smile. So, he said, Carmichael Construction is basically a shell. You are the engine. I am the engine, I agreed, and I'm taking my engine elsewhere. Ren, Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper, do you know why I was coming to your father's house last night? To sign a deal? To consider a merger, he corrected. Your father is drowning in debt. He's leveraged the company to the hilt to pay for Bradley's mistakes. He begged me to buy his bad debt, promising that the Sapphire Tower revenue would pay it back. He's desperate. My mind raced. If he doesn't get your money, he goes bankrupt in 30 days, Julian said. But if I sign, I save him. I looked Julian in the eye. Don't save him. I have a better idea, Julian said, crossing his legs. We don't just walk away. We let him think he's won. We let him think I'm investing. We let him dig the hole deeper, and then we bury him in it, I finished. Julian extended his hand. Partner? I shook it. My grip was weak, but my resolve was steel. Partner. The next 3 days were a blur of activity, but not the kind you expect in a maternity ward. While other mothers were learning to swaddle, I was plotting a corporate hostile takeover between breastfeeding sessions. My baby girl, I named her Hope, was doing better every hour. Seeing her in that incubator, so small but fighting so hard, fueled my rage. Every beep of her monitor was a reminder. They left her to die. Julian turned the hospital suite into a war room. He had his lawyers bring in stacks of documents. We worked on a strategy that was simple, brutal, and legally watertight. The structure is this, Julian explained, pointing to a whiteboard he'd had installed. I set up a shell company, Apex Holdings. Apex will offer to buy out your father's high-interest loans from the banks. Your father will agree because Apex will offer a slightly lower rate and a grace period. So Apex becomes the primary creditor, I said, catching on. Apex owns the debt. Exactly. And do you know who owns Apex? Julian grinned. You? No. He handed me a pen. You do. I stared at the paperwork. But I don't have the capital. I'm lending it to you, Julian said casually. Interest-free. Consider it an advance on your future earnings as the chief architect of Thorn Global. I signed the papers. My hand didn't shake this time. With a few strokes of a pen, I became the person who held the mortgage on my father's company and his house. But we needed more. We needed to prove his unfitness to run the trust fund. We needed to break the morality clause in my grandmother's will. We need inside information, I said, tapping the table. We need to know exactly where Bradley buried the bodies, the accounting fraud, the tax evasion. I have investigators, Julian said. They'll take too long, I shook my head. We need someone on the inside, someone they trust. Who? Uncle Ben. Benjamin Clark was the family lawyer. He had been my grandmother's best friend. For years, I thought he was just a spineless old man who did whatever my father told him. He watched me get demoted, watched my pay get cut, and never said a word. But then I remembered something. At David's funeral, Ben had squeezed my hand. He had whispered, "Keep your receipts, Wren. Someday it will matter." "Get Benjamin Clark here," I told Julian. "Is he safe?" "We're about to find out." 2 hours later, Uncle Ben walked into my hospital room. When he saw me, alive, sitting up, working, he dropped his briefcase. The old man actually started to cry. "Florence," he gasped, Richard told me you ran off. He said you had a breakdown and disappeared." "They locked me out in the storm, Ben," I said coldly. "They watched me bleed." Ben's face went from relief to a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "They did what?" "And now," I said, "I'm going to take everything from them. Are you with me, or do I need to destroy you too?" Ben straightened up. He wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. He looked at Julian, then back at me. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver USB drive. "I've been waiting 5 years for you to say that," Ben said. He placed the drive in my hand. "Richard thinks I'm senile. He lets me handle everything. This drive contains the real ledgers. Bradley has embezzled over $3 million from the company accounts to pay for online gambling and other things." My jaw dropped. $3 million. "And Richard knows," Ben continued. "He's been covering it up by creating fake vendor invoices. That's tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy." "Why didn't you do something earlier?" Julian asked. Ben looked at me sadly. "Because of the trust, Florence. If I exposed them, the company would implode, the assets would be seized by the government, and your inheritance, your grandmother's legacy, would vanish. I needed a way to transfer control to you before the ship sank, but the will is strict. It only allows transfer of power if the male heir is deemed criminally negligent or morally bankrupt by a court of law." I squeezed the USB drive. "Is attempted murder morally bankrupt enough?" "More than enough," Ben smiled grimly. "But there's more. Twist number 2. He pulled a yellow document from his briefcase. "Your grandmother added a codicil to the trust the week before she died. Richard destroyed his copy, but I kept the original." He pointed to a paragraph. "In the event that the beneficiary, Florence, produces a viable heir, the trust does not wait until age 35. It unlocks immediately upon the birth of the child, provided the child is named in the family registry." I gasped. I tried to tell them. I needed the signature for the hospital. "They didn't want the baby born," Ben said, his voice shaking with anger. "Bradley knows about this clause. That's why he hates you. That's why he pushed you out. If Hope is born, Bradley loses his allowance." A silence fell over the room. It wasn't just greed. It was calculated, cold-blooded elimination. "Okay," I said. "Here is the plan. Ben, you go back. Tell them nothing. Tell them you haven't heard from me. Let them think I'm dead." "What are they doing now?" Julian asked. Ben checked his watch. "They are preparing for the signing gala. The one with you, Mr. Thorne. It's in 2 days. They are so confident you're going to invest that Bradley has already ordered a new yacht. Let them celebrate, I said, leaning back against the pillows. Let them climb as high as they can. The fall will kill them. While I was recovering, regaining my strength with protein shakes and strategizing, my family was busy digging their own graves. Thanks to Uncle Ben, who was now wearing a wire and had installed hidden cameras in the office, we watched them. We sat in my hospital room, watching the live feed on a large monitor. It was sickening. "Pass the bottle," Bradley laughed, kicking his feet up on my desk. He was sitting in my chair. "Man, I should have cleared this office out months ago. It smells like cheap perfume and desperation in here." Richard was pacing the floor. "You're sure she's not coming back? It's been 3 days, Brad. If the police—" "Dad, relax," Bradley scoffed. "She probably crawled to a shelter, or she's frozen in a ditch. Either way, she's not our problem. The blizzard covered the tracks. No body, no crime." My blood ran cold. No body, no crime. "What about the signature?" Richard asked. "We need to access the emergency fund in her trust to pay for the catering for the gala. Thorne expects the best." "Easy," Bradley said. He pulled a sheet of paper out of a drawer. "I practiced. Look." He grabbed a pen and scribbled on the document. He held it up. It was a perfect forgery of my signature. "Bank authorization signed by Florence Carmichael, transferring $50,000 to the event planning account." "Gotcha," Julian whispered next to me. "That's felony forgery," Uncle Ben noted, taking notes on a legal pad, "on top of everything else." We watched as Richard sighed, then took the paper. "Fine, just get it done. Once Thorne signs the merger deal on Friday, we'll be flush. We can pay back the trust before anyone notices." "Pay it back?" Bradley laughed. "Dad, once Thorne signs, we're golden. I'm going to fire old man Ben, liquidate the construction arm, and pivot to crypto real estate." "Idiot," Julian muttered. "He's going to liquidate the assets I'm interested in." "He won't get the chance," I said. The feed switched to the living room of our house, my house. They had the maid, Mrs. Higgins, scrubbing the floors. "Scrub harder," Bradley yelled at her. "I want that spot on the porch gone. It looks like rust." It wasn't rust. It was my blood. Mrs. Higgins was crying silently as she scrubbed. She knew. She had tried to open the window that night to throw me a blanket, but Bradley had caught her and threatened to deport her. "I'm going to take care of Mrs. Higgins, too," I vowed. The days passed. My strength returned. I was no longer the pregnant woman waddling in pain. I was lighter. My scars were healing. I dyed my hair from its usual mousy brown to a stark, fierce blonde. I traded my maternity leggings for a tailored suit Julian's stylist brought me. I looked in the mirror. Florence was gone. Vera Vane was here. "Are you ready?" Julian asked on the morning of the gala. I looked at Hope in her bassinet. I kissed her tiny forehead. For her, I'd burn the world down. "We don't need to burn it," Julian adjusted his cufflinks. "We just need to evict the squatters." The night of the gala arrived. It was being held at the Four Seasons Ballroom. The cream of Seattle society was there. Investors, city council members, competitors, they were all there to witness the union of Carmichael Construction and Thorne Global. Or so they thought. I sat in the back of the limousine with Julian. My hands were folded over a thick leather portfolio. Inside was the deed to the Carmichael building, the deed to the family estate, and the transfer of debt documents. "Nervous?" Julian asked. "No," I said honestly. "I'm excited." We pulled up to the valet. The paparazzi were flashing away. "Wait here," Julian told me. "I'll go in first. I need to set the stage. You come in when I give the signal." "What's the signal?" "You'll know." I watched from the tinted window as Julian entered the ballroom. He was greeted like a king. Richard and Bradley practically bowed to him. They looked slick, polished, and utterly smug.
Bradley was wearing a tuxedo that I knew he bought with the stolen $50,000. I pulled up the live stream on my phone, courtesy of James, who was inside with a hidden camera. Richard tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Tonight marks a historic moment, a new era. Carmichael Construction has always been about family." I scoffed loud enough for the driver to hear. "We have weathered storms," Richard continued, "but we stand strong. And now, thanks to the brilliance of my son, Bradley—" Applause. Bradley stepped up, looking falsely humble. "And his design for the Sapphire Tower," Richard finished. "We have attracted the partnership of Mr. Julian Thorne." Bradley took the mic. "Thank you, Dad. You know, design is a lonely business. It takes vision. It takes strength. When I drew the Sapphire Tower, I knew it had to be bold. He was stealing my words. He was stealing my soul." Julian stepped up to the podium. The room went silent. "Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Bradley." Julian's voice was smooth, amplified by the speakers. "The Sapphire Tower is indeed a masterpiece. The sustainability features alone are worth billions." He paused. He looked directly at Bradley. "Which is why," Julian said, his voice turning icy, "I insist on signing the contract with the actual architect." The room murmured. Bradley laughed nervously. "Mr. Thorne, you're looking at him." "Am I?" Julian asked. "Because my team did some due diligence, and the metadata on the original files doesn't say Bradley. It says Vera Vane." Richard stepped forward. "A pseudonym. Bradley uses a pseudonym for artistic privacy." "Is that so?" Julian smiled. "Well, that's wonderful, because I invited Vera Vane here tonight to join us." The crowd gasped. Richard and Bradley froze. They looked at the door. They were expecting nobody. They were expecting a bluff. "Ladies and gentlemen, the head of design for the new Carmichael Thorne partnership, Miss Vera Vane." The double doors swung open. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing the gray office clothes they were used to. I was wearing a blood-red gown that draped over my postpartum body like armor. My blonde hair was slicked back. My chin was high. I walked down the grand staircase. The click of my heels echoed in the silence. I saw Bradley's face. All the color drained out of it. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He dropped his wine glass. Crash. Red wine splattered on his shoes, looking just like the blood on the snow. Richard grabbed the podium for support. "Florence?" he whispered. I walked right up to the stage. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight at them. "Hello, Dad. Hello, Bradley," I said into the microphone. "Did you miss me?" "You are amazing for sticking with me this far. Take a deep breath, because the revenge is about to start, and it is sweet. If you are ready to see these villains get what they deserve, hit the like button and comment the number 1 below. Your support is the fuel that helps me finish this story." The Four Seasons Ballroom was a golden cage of excess. From the tinted back window of the limousine parked across the street, I watched the guests arrive. It was a parade of Seattle's elite. Women in silk gowns that cost more than my first car. Men in bespoke tuxedos checking their Rolexes. They were walking into a celebration of theft. They were walking into a party funded by the money my father had stolen from my grandmother's trust, the very money intended to keep his own grandchild alive. Inside the car, the air was cool and filtered, a stark contrast to the freezing blizzard that had nearly claimed me just a week ago. Julian sat beside me, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked like a predator, sensing blood in the water. He held a tablet in his hand, streaming the live feed from inside the ballroom. "Are you sure you want to watch this?" Julian asked, his voice low. "It's going to be ugly."
I need to watch it, I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. I need to see them climb to the very top so I can enjoy the fall. On the screen, the camera, hidden in a floral arrangement near the podium, panned across the room. There they were, Richard and Bradley. My father looked healthier than he had in years. The stress lines that usually edged his forehead were smoothed out by what I assumed was expensive scotch and the euphoria of perceived victory. He was shaking hands with the mayor, clapping shoulders, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch perfectly. But it was Bradley who made my stomach churn. My brother was wearing a midnight blue velvet tuxedo jacket. He held a glass of champagne like it was a scepter. He was surrounded by a group of young, eager investors, and I could hear his voice through the audio feed, loud and brimming with unearned confidence. "It came to me in a dream, honestly," Bradley was saying, gesturing wildly with his free hand. "The curvature of the sapphire tower. I wanted it to represent the fluidity of water, the way the sound crashes against the shore. It's about resilience. It's about strength." I gripped the leather armrest of the car so hard my knuckles turned white. "He's using my words," I whispered. "That's exactly what I wrote in the design brief, word for word." "He memorized your pitch," Julian noted, his jaw tightening. "He's not just stealing your work, he's stealing your soul." "Wait," I said. "Listen." On the screen, an investor asked, "But what about the cantilever system on the north face? Isn't that structurally risky given the wind loads in that corridor?" For a split second, panic flickered in Bradley's eyes. It was microscopic, but I saw it. He didn't know the answer. He didn't know that I had spent 3 weeks calculating the wind shear coefficients to ensure that specific cantilever would hold. "Great question," Bradley stammered, then flashed a blinding, fake smile. "But, engineering is like jazz. Sometimes you have to improvise. My team handled the math. I handled the vision. The vision is what matters." "Improvise?" I scoffed. "If you improvise with structural steel, people die, you idiot." The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Richard walked up to the microphone, tapping it twice. The room hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father began, his voice booming with false gravitas, "thank you for joining us on this historic night. Tonight, Carmichael Construction isn't just launching a building. We are launching a legacy." He paused for effect, looking out over the crowd with misty eyes. "This company was built by my mother, but tonight it is saved by my son." Applause rippled through the room. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Many of you have asked about my daughter, Florence," Richard continued, his tone shifting to a somber, practiced sadness. I leaned forward. Here it comes. "Florence has struggled," Richard sighed heavily. "Since the death of her husband, she hasn't been herself. The grief, the pressure, it was too much for her fragile state. She decided to step away from the company, to take a sabbatical in a facility where she can get the help she needs." "A facility?" I hissed. "He's telling them I'm in a mental institution?" "It's the perfect cover," Julian analyzed coldly. "If you show up claiming fraud, they can dismiss you as crazy. It protects them from your testimony." "And the baby?" someone from the crowd shouted, a gossip columnist, judging by the notepad. Richard looked down, shaking his head. "We pray for the best, but Florence's lifestyle, her instability, let's just say we are preparing for all outcomes. It is a private family tragedy." My heart hammered against my ribs. Instability? Lifestyle? I worked 16 hours a day. I didn't drink. I took every prenatal vitamin. And he was painting me as a hysterical, unfit mother to a room full of people who used to respect me. "But," Richard brightened, changing the subject, "we must look to the future. And the future is the Sapphire Tower. The future is the partnership with Thorn Global. He gestured to the side of the stage. Please welcome the genius who made this happen, my son, Bradley Carmichael. The room erupted. Bradley jogged onto the stage, soaking up the applause. He hugged our father. They looked like the picture of American success. Two men standing on a mountain of lies, unaware that the ground beneath them was rigged with explosives. Bradley took the mic. Thanks, Dad. You know, people ask me where I find the time to be the executive VP and the lead architect. It's hard work. It's sacrifice. While others were sleeping, I was drawing. I looked at Julian. He was sleeping. I was drawing. I was drawing while my husband's side of the bed was still cold. He's digging his grave, Ren, Julian said, checking his watch. It's time. I'm going in. You wait for the signal. What's the signal? I asked again. The signal, Julian adjusted his tie, is when I corner a rat and he has nowhere left to run. Julian opened the car door. The flashbulbs went crazy as he stepped onto the red carpet. I stayed in the shadows, watching the screen. I saw the energy in the room shift when Julian entered. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Richard and Bradley looked like they had seen God. They rushed to the edge of the stage to welcome him. Mr. Thorne, Richard practically squealed into the mic. Everyone, the man of the hour, our savior, Julian Thorne. Julian walked up the stairs. He didn't smile. He didn't shake their hands. He walked straight to the podium, forcing Bradley to step back. Thank you, Richard. Julian's voice was calm, commanding. But I'm not your savior. I'm an investor, and investors care about one thing above all else. Do you know what that is? Profit! Bradley shouted, raising his glass. The crowd laughed. No, Julian said. The laughter died. Authenticity. We care about the origin of the asset. I saw Bradley's smile falter. I have the contract here. Julian pulled a thick document from his jacket. Ready to sign. A merger worth $200 million. Richard looked like he was going to faint with joy. But, Julian paused, before I sign, I have one technical question for the lead architect, a question that has been bothering my engineering team. Anything, Bradley said, sweating now. Ask me anything. In the blueprints for the atrium, Julian said, there is a specific load-bearing calculation for the glass ceiling. It utilizes a Fibonacci sequence to distribute the weight of the snow. It's brilliant, truly genius. Bradley nodded vigorously. Yes, the Fibonacci sequence, exactly. That was my core concept. Strange, Julian said, because the Fibonacci sequence wasn't in the file you sent me last week. It was only in the file sent from a private server 3 months ago, a server registered to a Vera vein. The room went deadly silent. Who is Vera Vane? Bradley asked. She's a consultant, Bradley lied. A freelancer I hired. Is she? Julian looked directly at the camera hidden in the flowers, looking directly at me in the car. Because I'd like to meet her. In fact, I think the real architect should be the one to sign this contract. That was the signal. I opened the car door. The cold night air hit my face, but I didn't feel it. I felt fire. I smoothed the red silk of my dress over my hips. I lifted my chin. Let's go take back what's mine, I whispered. The double doors of the ballroom were heavy mahogany with gold handles. I stood before them for a moment, listening to the silence inside. The security guard, a man named Eddie, who had worked for my family for 10 years and who had once given me a candy bar when I was crying in the lobby, looked at me. His eyes went wide. Miss Wren? He whispered. We thought your father said, Open the doors, Eddie.
I said softly. He nodded, a grim determination on his face. He threw the doors open. I didn't just walk in, I invaded. The click of my heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots. Click, click, click. Heads turned. At first, there was confusion. The blonde hair, the makeup, the red dress, I looked nothing like the mousy, pregnant widow in oversized sweaters they were used to seeing. But then recognition dawned. It rippled through the room like a shockwave. Is that Florence? My God, she's alive! Look at her! I kept my eyes locked on the stage, on the two men who had left me to freeze. Richard dropped his glass. It didn't break on the carpet, but the wine spilled, staining his expensive shoes. Bradley looked like he was having a stroke. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I reached the bottom of the stairs. Julian reached down and offered me his hand. I took it, and he helped me up the steps. I stood center stage, the lights blindingly bright, but I didn't blink. I walked over to the microphone. I adjusted the height. "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, magnified by the speakers, filling every corner of the room. "You look surprised. Did the facility release me early?" Richard rallied, his survival instinct kicking in. He rushed toward me, arms open for a fake hug. "Florence, my darling, you're here. You're safe. We were so worried." I stepped back, sharp and quick. "Don't touch me." The venom in my voice stopped him cold. The audience gasped. "Ren, please," Bradley hissed, stepping in, trying to block me from the crowd. His voice was a desperate whisper. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing the family. Go backstage. We'll cut you a check. Whatever you want. Just get off the stage." I laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. "A check? From which account, Bradley? The one you emptied to buy that yacht, or the one you drained to pay your bookie?" "She's delusional," Bradley shouted to the crowd, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's off her meds. Security, remove her." "Security isn't coming," I said calmly, "because security works for the person who pays the venue. And since your credit cards were declined this morning, I paid the deposit." I turned to the audience. I saw the faces of bankers, lawyers, rivals. "My brother claims he is the architect of the Sapphire Tower," I said. "He claims he is a visionary. But a visionary creates. A thief just takes." "I am the architect!" Bradley screamed, losing control. "It's my name on the award. It's my firm." "Prove it," I challenged. "What?" "Prove it," I said, pointing to the laptop connected to the projector. "Julian asked you about the Fibonacci sequence in the glass ceiling. Show us the math. Right now, open the CAD file and show us the layer where you calculated the stress loads." Bradley stared at the laptop like it was an alien device. I don't have to perform for you." "You can't," I said, "because you don't have the password to the source layers. Only the creator does." I walked over to the laptop. I typed in a complex string of characters. DAVID1115. The screen behind us shifted. The 3D model of the tower exploded into a detailed wireframe view. Thousands of lines of code and calculations scrolled down the side. And there, embedded in the foundation layer of the digital model, glowing in bright blue text, was a hidden watermark. "Property of Vera Vane, a.k.a. Florence Carmichael." "I am Vera Vane," I announced. "I designed the Riverside Complex. I designed the City Library. And I designed the Sapphire Tower while my brother was sleeping off hangovers in the office I paid for." The crowd murmured, a low roar of realization. Smartphones were out, recording everything. Richard stepped forward, his face purple. "This is proprietary company information. You are violating your non-disclosure agreement. I will sue you."
You want to talk about the law? I asked, turning to him. Let's talk about the law. Let's talk about the law regarding inheritance. Let's talk about the law regarding fiduciary duty. You have no standing, Richard yelled. I am the trustee. I control your money. I control your life until you are 35. Actually, Julian stepped in, his voice cutting through the shouting match. That's where you're wrong, Richard. You're operating on old information. What are you talking about? Wren isn't just an employee you can fire, Julian said. She's the owner of the debt you're asking me to buy. And more importantly, she's a mother. At the word mother, Richard flinched. Where is it? I asked quietly. Where is the fake concern now? You haven't asked about the baby, Dad. You haven't asked if your granddaughter survived the blizzard you locked us out in. It was an accident, Bradley blurted out. The door jammed. We didn't know you were out there. You didn't know? I looked at Julian. Play it. Play what? Bradley asked, terror dawning in his eyes. The receipt, I said. The giant screen behind us went black. The wireframe of the tower vanished. In its place, a grainy, high-contrast black and white video appeared. It was unmistakable. The front porch of the Carmichael estate, snow swirling violently, a figure, me, heavy with child, banging on the glass. The audio boomed through the ballroom speakers, clearer than it had been in real life. Dad, please, I need the signature. The audience watched in horror as the figure on the screen fell to her knees. They saw the dark stain of blood spreading on the snow. Then they saw Bradley. He walked to the door. He opened it. The crowd leaned in. They expected him to help. Instead, on the massive 40-foot screen, everyone saw Bradley Carmichael shove his pregnant sister backward into the storm. You want that money so bad? You want the inheritance? You know the rules, Wren. If the heir dies without issue, the trust reverts to the closest male relative. Gasps, screams. One woman in the front row covered her mouth and started to cry. Do the math, sis. You dying out here? It's the best business deal I've made all year. The video ended with the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Click. I stood on the stage, the silence ringing in my ears. I looked at Bradley. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was a small, trembling child caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. You didn't just lock a door, I said, my voice shaking with the memory of the cold. You tried to erase me. You tried to kill hope so you could buy a yacht. That isn't business, Bradley. That isn't family. That is evil. Richard tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He looked at the investors, the mayor, his friends. They were all looking back at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. This is doctored, Bradley shrieked, his voice cracking. It's a deep fake. It's AI. Julian Thorne is framing me. It's not a deep fake. A deep voice boomed from the back of the room. We all turned. Walking down the aisle was Uncle Ben, and he wasn't alone. He was flanked by 4 uniformed police officers. It's evidence, Ben said, holding up a file. State's Exhibit A. The sight of the police entering the ballroom broke the spell of silence. A chaotic murmur erupted. People were standing up, craning their necks. Camera flashes popped like a strobe light storm. Uncle Ben walked up the stairs to the stage. He moved with a vigor I hadn't seen in him for 20 years. He placed his briefcase on the podium, pushing Bradley's champagne glass aside. Benjamin? Richard stammered, his face draining of blood. What are you doing? Tell them this is a misunderstanding. You're the family attorney. I am the attorney for the Carmichael Trust, Ben corrected, his voice amplified by the microphone. My duty is to the beneficiary, and as of 3 days ago, you are no longer the trustee, Richard. You can't remove me, Richard roared, trying to regain control. I have power of attorney.
Not anymore, Ben said calmly. He pulled a document from his case. This is the morality clause from your mother's will. If the trustee engages in acts of moral turpitude, violence, or felony negligence against the beneficiary, all administrative powers are immediately revoked. Ben looked at the screen where the video had just played. Attempted manslaughter qualifies, Richard. But the money, Bradley yelled. The money is still ours. The company is ours. Actually, Ben smiled, a thin, sharp smile. There's another clause, the viable heir clause. The trust was designed to unlock fully only when Florence turned 35 or when she produced a living heir to the Carmichael line. I stepped forward. Her name is Hope, I said. She was born 3 days ago. She is healthy. She is beautiful. And her birth certificate just unlocked $50 million. No, Bradley whispered. No, that's impossible. It gets worse for you, Julian said, stepping up beside me. Because even if you fight the trust in court, you have a bigger problem today, right now. What problem? Richard asked, sweating profusely. The debt, Julian said. Carmichael Construction is insolvent. You owe $40 million to 3 different banks. You were counting on my investment to pay them off. Yes, so sign, Richard begged. Sign the deal, Julian. Save us. I did sign a deal, Julian said, just not with you. He pulled a contract from his jacket pocket. Yesterday, my holding company, Apex, purchased all of your outstanding debt from the banks. They were happy to sell it for pennies on the dollar because they thought you were going under. So you're our creditor? Richard looked hopeful. We can work out a payment plan. Apex Holdings immediately transferred that debt, Julian continued, ignoring him, to a new owner. He handed the contract to me. I held it up. I own your debt, Dad. I own the mortgage on the office. I own the loans on the equipment. And I own the mortgage on the house. You? Richard stared at me. But you're my daughter. I am your creditor, I corrected, and I am calling in the loan, in full, immediately. We don't have $40 million, Bradley screamed. Then I am initiating foreclosure, I said coldly. I am seizing the collateral. What collateral? Everything, I said. The building, the brand, the cars, and the house. You have until midnight to vacate the premises. You can't do this, Richard lunged at me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You gave me a drafty office and a cut in pay, I yelled back, letting my anger finally explode. You gave me neglect, and when I needed you most, you gave me hypothermia. You didn't raise me, Richard. You survived off me. The police officers stepped onto the stage. They moved efficiently. 2 of them grabbed Bradley. 2 of them moved toward Richard. Bradley Carmichael, the officer said, snapping the handcuffs on. You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and attempted manslaughter. Dad, do something, Bradley shrieked as the metal clicked around his wrists. He looked like a child, terrified and pathetic. Richard Carmichael, the other officer said, spinning my father around. You are under arrest for conspiracy, tax evasion, and accessory to attempted murder. This is a mistake, Richard shouted to the crowd as he was frog-marched down the stairs. I am a pillar of this community. Call the mayor. Call the governor. But the mayor had already turned his back. The governor was busy typing a statement on his phone, distancing himself from the Carmichael family. I stood at the edge of the stage, looking down at them. As they were dragged past the front row, Richard looked up at me. His eyes were wild, pleading. Ren, please, he choked out. The house, it's all I have left. It's not your house, I said, my voice amplified one last time.
It's Hope's house, and I'm selling it. I don't want her growing up in a place where family leaves family to die. They were dragged out the double doors, the flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminating their shame. The ballroom was silent again, but it wasn't the heavy, awkward silence of before. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Julian. "Are you okay?" he whispered. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 6 months, my chest didn't feel tight. The weight was gone. The cold was gone. "Yes," I said. I looked out at the audience. They were staring at me with a mix of fear and awe. They realized that Carmichael Construction wasn't dead. It had just shed its skin. I leaned into the microphone. "I apologize for the interruption to your evening," I said. "The catering has been paid for. Please enjoy the champagne. It's on the house." I paused. "But the name on the building outside is changing. Carmichael Construction is no more." I pointed to the screen. The video of the blizzard vanished. In its place, a new logo appeared. A stylized bird rising from flames, sharp and modern. Phoenix Architecture Studios. CEO, Florence Carmichael. "We are open for business," I said, "and we value integrity above all else." The applause started slowly. Uncle Ben clapped first, then the security guard, Eddie, then Julian, and then the whole room joined in. It was a thunderous sound, a wave of validation washing over me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just placed my hand on my stomach, thinking of my daughter sleeping safely in the nursery. "We did it, Peanut," I thought. "The wolves are gone." I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the old world behind me, stepping into the warmth of the new one I had built with my own 2 hands. The aftermath was swift and brutal. With the evidence Ben and I provided, the case was open and shut. Bradley's digital footprint was a mess. He had actually Googled how long for a pregnant woman to freeze to death on his company laptop. That search history alone was enough to deny him bail. Richard tried to pin it all on Bradley, but Ben's recordings of their conversations nailed him to the wall as a co-conspirator. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I moved out of the temporary apartment Julian had lent me and into a new place, a bright, warm penthouse overlooking the Sound, not the gloomy Carmichael mansion. I put that house on the market. A developer bought it to tear it down. Good riddance. I went to the office, my office. I walked into the corner office that used to be Bradley's. It was filled with tacky sports memorabilia and empty liquor bottles. "Burn it," I told the cleaning crew. "Everything. I want new carpet, new paint, new furniture." Mrs. Higgins came to see me. She was terrified she had lost her job. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, handing her a check, "this is back pay for every hour of overtime they never paid you, and a raise. I need a nanny for Hope while I run the empire. Are you interested?" She hugged me, weeping. "Oh, Miss Wren, thank you." The employees, the good ones, the ones who had been cowed into silence like me, cheered when I walked in. I fired the cronies, the drinking buddies, the sycophants. I promoted the quiet workers, the ones doing the actual heavy lifting. And Julian? He kept his word. He didn't try to take over. He stayed on as a silent partner, an advisor. One afternoon, he came into my new office. I was nursing Hope while reviewing the blueprints for the waterfront tower, the renamed Sapphire Tower. "You know," Julian said, looking at the view, "you're terrifying." Is that a compliment? In this industry, it's the highest compliment there is. He placed a box on my desk. "Evidence locker released this. I thought you might want it back." I opened the box. It was my old nameplate, Florence Carmichael, Junior Associate. I looked at it, then I threw it in the trash. "Not Florence," I said, "just Wren, and Phoenix."
The board of directors wants to know your first move as CEO, Julian said. My first move? I looked at Hope, sleeping soundly. My first move is to set up a scholarship fund for single mothers in architecture. No woman should have to choose between her career and her child. Done, Julian said. And the second move? We finished the tower, I said, and we put a plaque in the lobby. Dedication to your father? Julian joked. No, I smiled. Dedicated to the blizzard. It taught me that the cold doesn't kill you if you have a fire inside. 6 months later. I sat in the visitor's room at the state penitentiary. The glass partition was thick, scratched, and dirty. On the other side sat Richard. He looked old. The prison gray washed him out. His hair was white and thinning. He had lost weight. He picked up the phone. Ren. Hello, Richard. Have you come to get me out? He asked, a flicker of the old arrogance trying to spark. I can help you run the company. You don't know how to handle the unions. You need me. The company is posting record profits, I said calmly. We just finished the waterfront tower ahead of schedule, under budget. He slumped. Bradley? Bradley is in a different facility, I said. He took a plea deal. 5 years for fraud. You got 10 for the conspiracy and the assault. I never touched you. You locked the door, I said. That's enough. I reached into my bag and held up a photo against the glass. It was Hope. She was sitting up, smiling, holding a toy block. Richard stared at it. His eyes watered. She looks like your mother. She looks like herself, I said. She will never know you. She will never know Bradley. To her, you are just a cautionary tale. Ren, please, I'm family. No, I said, standing up. You're a relative. Family is the people who open the door when you're freezing. Family is Julian, who stood by me. Family is Ben, who risked his career. Family is Mrs. Higgins. I put the phone back on the hook. Ren, he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass. Ren, come back. I have nothing. I turned and walked away. The sound of his banging on the glass faded, just like my banging on the porch door had faded that night. I walked out into the sunshine. The air was crisp but not cold. Julian was waiting by the car, holding Hope. When Hope saw me, she squealed and reached out. I took her in my arms. She was warm, solid, real. Everything okay? Julian asked. Yeah, I said, looking back at the prison walls one last time. It's finished. Life is funny. You think the worst thing that can happen to you is the end, but sometimes the end is just the clearing of the ground for something new to grow. Phoenix Architecture Studios became the premier firm in the Pacific Northwest. We didn't just build buildings, we built communities. We specialized in sustainable, affordable housing mixed with high-end commercial space. We proved that profit and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. Uncle Ben retired to Florida on a very generous pension I set up for him. He sends Hope postcards with flamingos on them every week. Bradley, well, I heard he's having a hard time in prison. It turns out fraud and arrogance aren't traits that make you popular in the cell block. He writes me letters asking for money for the commissary. I return them unopened. And Julian? We're still partners, but maybe a little more. Last week, we took Hope to the zoo. People thought we were a family. And looking at the way he held her hand, the way he looked at me with respect instead of condescension, I thought, maybe we are. But the most important relationship I have is with myself. I stand on the balcony of the waterfront tower sometimes, looking down at the city. I think about the woman shivering on the porch. I want to hug her. I want to tell her, hold on. It gets better. You are stronger than they are. For any of you out there feeling locked out, feeling like the people who are supposed to love you are the ones hurting you, listen to me. Don't wait for them to open the door. They won't. Break the window, pick the lock,
or burn the house down and build a new one from the ashes. You have a fire inside you. Use it. Because the only thing colder than a blizzard is a heart without love. And the only thing stronger than fear is a mother who has decided to fight. My name is Ren Carmichael. I am a survivor. I am a mother. And I am the architect of my own life. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking this path with Ren and me to the very end. You are a truly special audience, deeper and more patient than the rest. Comment the letter A below so I know you are one of the few who finished the whole story. If this touched your heart, share your feelings in the comments. And please, click the next video on the screen to hear another story of justice and resilience. I'll see you there.